Hello everyone. Yeah, so good afternoon and welcome to the another session from Club TechBrewers. So, yeah, I'm Vaibhav, a board member of Club TechBrewers, and I welcome you all over here to our today's event, getting started with Angular. And I would like to welcome our team speaker, Santosh Yadav, a GitHub star, as well as a GDE Angular expert. Yeah, without further ado, I would like to hand over the stage to Santosh sir. Santosh, sir, please continue.
Vaibhav, thank you for the invitation, and of course, we will try to learn Angular today, and so it's going to be like a little bit hands-on. I'll tell you like how you can get started with Angular and what are the new things or new um, features like which are available as part of the Angular framework because it has improved a lot. I mean, there are new syntaxes, new ways to write component, and we'll of course go through them. So let's go ahead and get started. I will just share my screen and let's do that. Just a second, I have multiple screens, so let me make sure that I'm sharing the right screen. So if someone is in chat, if you can like confirm if you're able to see my screen now, or
The screen is visible, sir.
okay, great. So let's go ahead and get started with some with Angular. So to like give you a small idea about what I do. So my name is Santosh, and I'm a senior software engineer at a company called Celonis. I've been working with Angular since 2017. Yeah, I think that's when I started doing Angular. But before that, I was doing .NET and Angular JS. So I'm a GD for Angular, as yeah, Baba told you. So I'm GitHub star, and then I'm co-founder of a community called This Is Learning, and we are also doing a conference. So uh, if you are interested to join, you can just go to this is learning tl.netlify.com. So this is where you can actually find the registration link and everything. We are doing this as virtual conference, so it's on 16th and 17th May. So if you're interested, there will be more speakers which will be announced soon. We already have 6 speakers so far, and they're like from industry experts from and like people from Microsoft and uh, like uh, uh, people with more than 10 years of experience. They will be sharing their knowledge. So go ahead and register, and probably I'll see you there as well. And you can find me on LinkedIn, Twitter, or X, whatever you call it, and with Santosh Yadav Dev. And I also have a channel called Tech Talks with Santosh, where I have few videos like about Angular, in case you're interested. And let's go ahead and get started. So, like a lot of other frameworks, of course, Angular is something which is another framework. But the good thing about Angular is it's actually built in keeping productivity in mind. So it means like you are productive from day one. So it's like when your application grows, a lot of other frameworks where you it becomes more messy to manage your code. But with Angular, it's not the problem. It's actually made for enterprises, and now it's trying to remove that tag. I mean, that it's only for enterprises. It's not. It was never. But we so the Angular team is adding more and more features to make sure that it's more performant. It's more faster, and one of them is signals. We'll talk about it anyway. So let's see what you need to get started with Angular. So we of course need Node.js installed on your machine. You can choose any editor of your choice. I generally use VS Code, so I'll be using VS Code again. And then you need to know a little bit of TypeScript. I won't be covering anything about TypeScript here. Just see like a new application which I have already created, so to save some time, uh, because of course on if I try doing everything online, it will take some time. So let's see what Angular is. So generally, when you talk about Angular, this is an old logo, right? So we have replaced with new logo, and if you go to angular.dev, so this is a new website for Angular, angular.dev, and this is the new logo, of course. I forgot to replace it, but like this is the new logo which Angular came up with, and this is an old logo, right? And why this change? Because of course, Angular's old logo, the one we see, is actually was built when there was a time that CSS3, HTML5, all technologies came, and the logo was inspired by same. But now there were so many changes, and Angular was becoming a modern framework, so they decided to reinvent the logo, and then this logo, which looks, of course, a little bit or much better than I would say the previous one, is more to show that Angular has improved, and then Angular is going towards the modern era. So Angular contains a lot of things. I mean, Angular has, if you see, there are like a lot of logos around here. I mean, some of them are deprecated. For example, Protector, which got deprecated, then Karma, which got deprecated. But Angular contains a lot of other tools inside its own. So if I have to tell you a few, for example, they have support for forms, they have support for routing. You can actually build your own tool using Angular. That's a little bit advanced, but we won't be covering it here. You can create PWA using Angular. They Now Angular has now. I mean, it was there for a long time, but Angular has built-in support for SSR pre-rendering, and of course there is support for localization and internationalization, which is ITLM. And of course we have dependency injection, which is one of the great feature of Angular. And then there's support for UI library. So Angular Material is a UI library which is used by or built by Angular team, and it's supported by Angular team. So it's like pretty solid. You can use it on like your enterprise application because it's built for production uses. Right? And there are many more. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing which we have to do is, of course, we need to install the Angular CLI, and then you have to create a new app. As I said, like to save some time, I already created an app, and I created it for like a few weeks before for the live stream. So use the same command in case like you want to get started. Of course, you won't be able to do it online, but once you get time, so first thing is, of course, you need Angular CLI. There are two ways, of course, if you want to install it globally, or you can just use npx to create a new application as well. So I'll just show you like how you can do it using npx. So for example, if you don't want to install it globally, you can actually do just a second. So you can do npx. Okay, it's mhm, yeah, it's somehow. Let me know if it's visible. Whatever I'm typing, npx rectangular. So you can say, okay, this is Angular CLI, and then you can say new and your application name. So you can pass your app name here, and it will create a new application with the latest version of Angular CLI. You can also pass, like, of course, if you want to be more specific, you can do CLI at the rate latest or CLI at the rate version. In case you want to do it for specific version, or you can also do next in case you want to use beta version, which is totally recommended in case you're just trying out the next version, or you want to try some feature which is available in the next version. But yeah, but for production, don't do this. Don't do next. Okay, good. So let's go back to our app. And there are a few things which I've already added here. So what I will do is I will remove them for now, just to make sure that we are starting from scratch. And I'm just going to put this. And I'll try to be like as close as possible to a new application, right? So we can walk through this and see like what is there. And I'll just remove this and just print as of now. Let's say hello world. Right? That's where everyone starts. So we'll say okay, this is H1, and I'll go through different files which we have here, so you know like what's included, right? What's everything which is included when you create a new application. So let's go through the different files which we have. So there are few. TypeScript configuration file. So as I said, like I won't be talking about TypeScript, but of course, like, you need to have a basic idea about TypeScript. If you want to learn a basic of TypeScript, I mean, I also have a course on FreeCodeCamp, which will tell you a little or basics about at least. So if you go to the this is an old course which was built using Angular 13, which is available on FreeCodeCamp. So Angular for beginners. It will also tell you about TypeScript. So it has close to 1.2 million views now. But yeah, I mean, you're not going to learn the new syntax. But you can actually refer the first 3 hours for TypeScript, which will cover the basic of TypeScript. I mean, let me just share the link here if I can. And for beginners, so okay, oh, I cannot. Okay, probably I'll share in the private chat so someone can share it. Okay, cool. So let's go through all the files which we have here because we are already learned this. So this is your TypeScript configuration file which will be used to compile your TypeScript code. And there are three, like so one is used by your application, one is used for your test in case you have test, and then you have a base config where you can apply all the all the global TypeScript configuration. So this is automatically generated for you. The entire workspace will be generated for you. You don't have to do anything manually. Then there is a server.ts file. One thing which Angular 17 has done is uh, they have an SSR setup available. So server side rendering is available with Angular 17 when you create a new application. So it will ask you a question whether you want to enable SSR or not. You can say yes or no. I would say yes. Go ahead and say yes. And where you can verify which version of Angular you're using, it's actually available in your package.json. So you can see I'm using 17.3.0. The log file is nothing but your package, or you can say it contains metadata about like from where your packages was downloaded, what was the version. So it's more about npm. Angular.json, it's very important file when you work with Angular. So it has information about your workspace. So let's say Angular allows you to have multiple application, multiple libraries within a workspace, and all the information will be available here. Right now, I just have one single application which is called Angular with Alex, and this application, what it will tell you like what the project type is, what I'm using for styling. For example, I'm using a CSS for styling, and then few other information like how I can build the application, how I can serve the application, what should happen when I do extract titan, which is related to internationalization. What should happen when I do test, right? So you can see it uses karma, but which is deprecated now. And these are different options, or you can say different tasks which you can run on your application. So let's go ahead and try to serve our application. So whenever you create a new application, what you do first thing, right? So you set up your application and then you try to serve it. I mean, whether you're using React or you're using Vue, you just to serve, right? First command. So I can say, okay, this is npm run start, and you might be wondering like why I'm doing serve. So it's sorry, why I'm doing start when it's I suggested serve because it's actually configured here in your package.json as a script. So I can also do npm run start and it will just run this command. So now it will start up like start running. Okay, I think I did build. So I'll just stop this and do serve, which because I want to see like how our application looks like. and payment start. So it will run the application, it will serve it locally, so you can verify the changes which you want to apply. And then let's see, right? So it's up. Your application is running and it's running on localhost 4200. So let's go ahead and see. Okay, so we got our hello world. So you can see we have Let me zoom in a little bit more. So in just in case we have some small text, because this is H1, of course, it looks bigger. So we just rendered our first application, but let's talk about like how this works, right? How this rendering works and what are the different files which is involved. So if you go inside the src folder, I mean, there are a few more files. I mean, editor config and git ignore. I don't think I have to cover about them because they are very common in most of the projects or most of the front end frameworks you do. At least git ignore is everywhere. So here we have few files. One is called main.ts and one is called main server.ts. So this is for server-side rendering. So this file will be used for server-side rendering, and then this is main.ts will be used for bootstrapping your application. Now, what do you mean by bootstrapping? So let's say whenever you serve your application, what happens? The first process is uh, your framework has to be bootstrapped. So it has to actually let everyone know that okay, everything is compiled and now ready to be served. So this actually does that task. It will bootstrap your application and it will serve the first page which needs to be rendered. Not the first page, but like main function which needs to be executed to render something on UI. And then how this is related, like how does this happen? Just to go a little bit like to give you an idea like how it works. So when you run your Angular application, there is something called main.ts file which is defined here. So I just scroll this down and you should be able to see your main function. Yeah, here, right? So you can see whenever so there is a line here called browser, and then it says main.ts. So this will be the first function which will be executed when we try to run serve or when we build and yeah. So this is the first file, right? And then this file actually calls something called bootstrap application, and it bootstraps a component. So remember, when you work with any front end framework, right? So there is an index.html file which is available, which is your root HTML file, and it renders whatever is available inside the body tag. And now inside this body tag, you have something called app root. So what this app root is? So again, let's try to go to the basics. So whenever you use any front-end framework, what you generally do, you create something called as components. Now, what are components? So components are nothing but your custom HTML tags. So let's say if you're doing React or if you're doing Vue or even if you're doing Angular, so you actually just create components, which is small HTML tags, which has some logic, which has some UI, which you can render anywhere. So to start entire thing, you need to have one root component, and then root component can have like their child component, and that's your DOM tree. So if you like read about HTML, you might have read about DOM and then DOM tree, right? So DOM tree is nothing but whatever you see when you serve your application and you inspect element, and then this is your DOM. And then actually to render this, your browsers actually generate a DOM tree so they know like, what are the different DOM elements which are available. Of course, this Grammarly is not related to this. This is an extension, but it's here, right? So I have root. So this is my root component. So now we know about the root component. Let's see what root component contains. So this is my app component.ts. So if I see my root component, I have an selector. So I'll tell you what selector is. This is our HTML tag name. So I can like call it whatever I want. Generally, Angular recommends that you should have a prefix whenever you are using a selector. For example, some frameworks, they just have something called root, right? For example, React, or let's say any other frameworks. But Angular says, okay, use prefix, but this can be that this can become optional in future. I mean, this is not going anywhere right now, so this is still used. So, but that's a plan that in future you may want to actually get rid of the selector property and then do some generate some tag automatically. So this is your HTML name. I'll talk about standalone, what standalone is, and then imports as well. But and then you have a template URL because, as I said, HTML tags are what they will contain some logic, some UI. So you can define that UI in your app component.html. So if you see app component.html, which is here, you'll see this hello world, which is actually rendered on our UI right now. So this is the H1 which we have here. And then you can also apply some styling, and then styling is defined in this CSS file. For example, if I do uh, dot h1, and then let's see, hope I'm not right. Sorry, element class h1. Okay, uh, star, or I can say h1. So this will apply to h1, and then I can say, okay, this is color. There is, let's hope it gets up rendered. Yeah, you can see the color is, sure, it's not really visible, but I can say, okay, this is red. And okay, and I hope this is visible now. So because red is more visible on uh, whenever doing live streams. So, but yeah, this is an style sheet file where you can define all the styles. I'll just remove it, and then of course you render that as a first as your root component. But you can create your own component as well. And now let's go ahead and do that. And then we'll talk about the standalone flags and everything else. So to add a new component, so to add a new component, Angular actually allows you to do everything using CLI. So you don't have to create this manually, right? So I can say, okay, ng generate component, and I'll say, okay, this is home component. And Angular will automatically create a new home component for us, and all the files which is needed, for example, your HTML, CSS, and TypeScript, as well as spec file to write your unit test. I mean, you can disable it in case you are not using it. The recommended way is, if you don't have test, if you're not planning to write a test, don't have that spec file. I mean, because this will just make your life difficult when you try to add it in future. So maybe you don't want to use Karma. You may want to use Jest or something else. So don't do that. Or if you're planning to write test, then only use it. And now let's open this file. So there are a few flags I said, like you have your selector flag, selector property, then you have template, you have style URL, and then class where you can write some logic. So we'll come to that logic. But let's talk about the standalone and import tags. So before Angular 15, so whenever you want to create an Angular component, we had something called modules. So we had to create modules to wrap a component or to register a component. But that was removed, and then it got replaced with this flag called standalone true. It means each component can have its own services, it can have its own different modules which it wants to use, and that's why this standalone true flag is. I mean, you just need to understand why it is. I mean, because if you are writing a new code and then you just suddenly come across this, you don't have to care about it basically now, because it has become default. But remember, that's the logic. I mean, why we have this flag. In future, this can be removed because it's just there to support the backward compatibility. Because there are, in if you go to enterprises, I mean, they're not like migrating the entire code base at once, right? So this is to make sure the applications are incrementally able to migrate and adopt the new features. So this is the new feature available with Angular 15 and above, and that's why it exists. So let's go ahead and try to see like how we can use a component inside another component. And to do that, we'll write some logic, of course. So, and we already have something called homeworks, just a simple p tag. And let's see how we can render this inside our root component. As I said, there is only one root component which is available, app component.html. And if you want to render this home component, you have to do is you have to copy this. Let's go to HTML, and I'll just place this HTML tag. Now we all know like how to use HTML tags, right? So I can just say uh, open tags this, and Angular supports self-closing tags. It means what I mean by self-closing tags is I can do this, and this should work. But why it is not working? I mean, what's wrong here? It says some squiggly lines. Yeah, it gives you some squiggly lines. Now, there's a service, you can say an extension called Angular Language Service. This is you should install this. Like for example, right now I'm just on a little bit older version, but you can just say reload required and it will reload the new version. What is the advantage of using this extension or Angular language services? It will give you intelligence. It will tell you inside your editor if you have done something wrong or if you're missing something. So here it gives you a line that says, okay, import home component from home component on app component. Like I'll tell you what is this. I'll just do it manually so you know. So to use this component, right, home component, the new component which we created, your app component needs to know, or it can be any other component, like, but they need to know that this component is available, and how they can know is by registering them, by telling them, telling app component explicitly that okay, this component exists, and how to do that. So it's actually you need to do import, and then you can say import from home component, which is available at this path home/home component, and then uh, you need to add this into imports. And this is why this exists. So you can add different components, different modules. And if I go to HTML now, it's gone. The error is gone. And it says, okay, this exists. And if you press Control and then click, it will able to like navigate you to the correct component and tell you, okay, this component exists here. And now let's run this again. We should be able to sorry. Um, we should be able to see something known as home works on your UI. So let's run this up again. Okay, still building. Okay, so you can see hello world and then it says homeworks, right? So we got, yeah, we got it rendered on the UI. But there are more things, right? I mean, so one common pattern which a lot of developers use is routing, right? I mean, if you, how many of you have, routing? What routing is? I mean, just simple yes in the chat would be enough. But or you have like done some routing using any other framework. So just to get the idea if you know about it. Yeah. Okay. So Western says yes. Yeah. Probably. Probably yes. Most of you may know, right, what routing is. I mean, so routing is where you actually have a nav bar and then you click on navigation, and yeah, it's actually available in all the frameworks, right? You do some little bit of routing. Yeah, basically routing to a new page. So how does Angular does that? So Angular has its own routing framework, and it's not like published separately. It's part of the framework. So as I said, like when we saw the initial slide, we said okay, it has routing, it has forms, so everything is built in, but they are different packages. So here, if I go to Angular package.json, you will see something called as Angular/router, and this is what enables or provides the features for routing. So let's see, let's add a new component and let's try to use a router for that. So let's open a new tab. And I'll say, okay, this is Benji, create component, and then about us. Right. So we'll create a new component, but this component will be rendered or be accessible using a route. So there are a few things. When you start a new application, this file already exists, and it's actually known as app.routes.ts. So it has something to do with route, but what we'll figure that out. So the first thing which we need to create a routing is routing configuration. So we can actually add some routing configuration here, and let's see what those routing configuration is. So we have to provide something called path, and we can say this path is, let's say, path is about us, and then you have to say, okay, when I navigate to about us, so this is like path about us is registering an URL in your front end. So you are saying, okay, when I navigate to about us, there is actually a route which exists. For example, if you have been doing backend, for example, Spring Boot or .NET, you also define the APIs, right? You say, okay, slash about us slash maybe API slash get users or API slash post users, whatever. But they are actually, those are the paths which you define on server. So this is what we are doing at the client side. We are saying, okay, this path exists on your browser. So when you try to access this exists. And the next step is, of course, loading what will happen when you click on about us. And what we want to do here is we want to actually render about us page. So to do that, we have something called as load component. So this load component will actually, let's see, there are two ways to do it. I will show you both. So I'll say, okay, this is import, and then you can define dot slash, okay, dot slash, and then we'll say home slash home component, and we'll say then if this path exists or this module exists, go ahead and give me m dot home component. So this is like what I'm doing here. So let me just explain a little bit. So doing a, a dynamic loading of this particular module. I mean, so this will. What is the advantage of doing this right now? So this is something called as lazy loading. I'm sure most of you might have heard about lazy loading. So this is like loading this code on demand. Okay, it doesn't exist, or the code for this is not loaded by default by your browser. And a lot of different frameworks supports lazy loading in different ways. So this is the way Angular does using routing. So I'll just rerun the build to show you like how it looks like, but we have to do more configuration. So I'll just add a new routing or anchor tag, right? So let's go ahead and do this. I'll just remove this home from here for time being and just add an anchor. And now in Angular, you don't use href. Okay, so if you have used href, you know that href actually makes a server side like refresh the entire page which you have. So rather than that, we have something called as router link. And you see, I mean, I'm not able to actually get any intelligence. We said, okay, if you have Angular language service, you should be able to get all this intelligence, but it's not available because we need to have or need to register a few more modules. So we have something called as router outlet, and we need to have router link. Okay, so this router link will enable us to use some of the properties or some of the things which we need. So for example, router link, we'll say, okay, this router link is equals to, we can just leave it as without box. And then we can say this router link is equals to slash about, and we can say, okay, this is about this. And let's try to run this because we are still missing one important thing, and that's something everyone misses when they start with Angular. I mean, I still do. I am, and I'll tell you what that is. And it can waste your several minutes if you forget about it. So what we did so far, we registered a new route. We said, okay, let's register a route called about us at client side. Then we placed an anchor tag. We are using router link, which is uh, the way to do href for your Angular components. And then we are saying, okay, let's go ahead and run this. And okay, let's open the KV browser and let's refresh. So we should have a router link or at least a link called about us. And let's see. So this exists, but let's click on this and nothing is happening. You see, nothing is actually happening. So it says cannot match any route URL about us. Let's see what we did and what we have to do to make it work. So the first thing which you have to do is you have to place something known as router outlet. So once you place this router outlet, let's see. And let's click here. Cannot match in your segment. Okay, I'm still missing something. Probably a path about us, load component this, and this match. Mhm. Missing this. Oh, not. Yeah. Path can start with this and okay. So if I click here, it's not working. And okay, let's try to define the empty or the default route. So I can say path and then we'll say redirect to about us. And we have to say path match to. Okay, so hope this works now. Okay, so home works about us still not working. Let's see. Okay, so about us is now working, but why it's not rendered? Let's see. So we have app home, home works, and then router link, router outlet. So we got everything available here, and still there's no sign of about us. So it should render like about us works. That's what we are expecting it to do. But let's see. So we have router outlet here. Okay. Oh my god. Oh my god. Sorry, I just said home rather than about. Okay, so let's render about us rather than home. And so it's actually working if you see, right? So it was actually displaying home component. Yeah. So what I was missing is that actually I was placing the banana in the box syntax or the box syntax. It's not needed. I can just say router link and about us because I have defined this URL. And let's see. So if I click on about us, let's remove 4200. Why it is going to about us? Because I have defined this as a default config. That's what I did here when I added this path empty. So I'm saying whenever the path is empty, go to about us and the path match should be full. So it will should match the entire path. But if I remove this, let's get rid of it and let's move to 4200. So if you see, I mean, it's empty. So it's not like uh, your default URL is not triggered. This is something which you can do for, like, for example, login screens. So let's say if you want your users to log in by default, you can just configure a new default route. So this is your default route where you can say, okay, go to login. As we already have only one URL, so we said, okay, let's go to about us, and then it goes by default to about us when you initialize your application. So this is a basic configuration. But as I said, like this is important. This is something known as lazy loading. So if you see, I'll just go to a network tab and clean this. Let's clear this, and I'll remove the default parameter because I want to show you this part uh, as working example in the browser. And let me zoom in. Okay, so I hope you are able to see the console or yeah console or network tab here. So if you see that there are few URLs or few resources which are loaded, let's remove. Let's call 4200. Okay, so there are like few files and there are different chunks which is loaded, and I'll just make sure that nothing is from coming from cache. Yeah, empty cache and hard reload. And what happened? It's taking some time. Okay, so now we got all the file, and let's remove this and let's click on about us. So if you see this chunk, VW, whatever, is actually loaded when I clicked on the about us. So this is something known as lazy loading. So you are not loading this code as part of your home or part of your default build. But if you are loading this on demand, so this is very important syntax to understand. You can also do this syntax where you can define a component and you can say, hey, I want to just load home component, for example, let's say, right? And I can remove this. They cannot coexist. So you can either use component and load lazy loading. So when I say component, there is no lazy loading. So it actually is part of your default build, and everything will be loaded together. So decide like what you want to lazy load, just in case, like let's say something which is needed not when your application is initialized, then you have need for lazy loading. But otherwise, we can just live with component. And I'll just leave this here so you know like the syntax exists. But there are a few more things which we can do. We have just seen the uh, uh, what you can say, the routing part, and now how you create a new component. But what about rendering something? What about in case I create a property and I want to render it on the UI? So to do that, let's go ahead and place this. Let's use this home component, right? So in Angular, whenever you want to like render something on the UI, the way it works is using the interpolation syntax. So for example, let's say if I say, oh, this is a title property. So I will define this in your TypeScript and say, okay, this is home. And once I want to render this title in component, I can just say, let's remove this home works, and I'll just replace with an S2 and say, this is interpolation syntax or double curly brackets. And then you can put the property inside the curly brackets. And that's it. So if I click on, so let's render home because we removed it, if you remember. So I'll just put it back before the anchor tag. And now you will see you have home as well, which is rendered using interpolation syntax. So this is a basic of a rendering which you can do, but there is more to rendering, right? So you may have a list, you may have conditional rendering, like how to do all those stuff. So Angular now supports the built-in syntax. So there are built-in syntax which exist. For example, let's say I'll uh, I'll try to do two things. I'll try to create a property which can exist on my child component. So what I mean by property? So for example, let's say if you do a div, right? So div has some attributes, some properties. For example, there's something called inner text, right? So inner text is a property which you can use. If home component is actually an HTML tag, I should be able to do the same on HTML, right? And that's what we can do using something known as input and output. So I'll show you an example of doing that. So let's see. So to do this, to have a property on your child component or on your components, I'm sure like if some of you might have done React, sorry, in React you can say you can also pass properties, right? As part of your child component. So here we have to define the child properties first. And let's say I'll say, okay, this is employee, or this is let's start with the basics. So I'll say, okay, this is name, and this name is nothing but an input property. So I'll say, okay, this is input, and I can say, okay, the default value is empty. Okay. And now my parent component, the parent component, what I mean by parent component is the component someone above home who is actually calling a home component is my parent component. It can be anyone. They can pass this property down. So let's see how that. So we have this name property, and let's go back and say here. And here, if I say app home, and then I can do name, and then I can pass any name here. For example, this is a string, so I'll pass property, or let's say Sachin, right? And now we are passing the property, but we are not rendering it. Let's go ahead and try to do that. So we said we use uh, interpolation syntax, and then we can pass name. And there is an important thing here. So you see, name is a function and should be invoked. So I'll I'll do this, and then I'll tell you what why this is doing this. I mean, in case you have experience using Angular before, I mean this might be something new, and you can see the Sachin is rendered here. But what is this? Why we are calling it as a function? Uh, so to give you some idea about it, Angular is adopting something known as signals. Just to like get the idea, how many of you have heard about signals in JavaScript? So this is something which exists in Solid. This is something which exists in like Svelte, some exists on Vue, but Angular is adopting this, and now this signal thing is actually going to be part of default web specs, web specification. Basically, it's something which will be available in your JavaScript code. So anyone who has any idea, like have just heard about signals, what signals are. So in case not, I'll just tell you like what is this. So now in Angular, you can define like inputs or input properties as signals. So signals are something which is lazy. So just treat this as a function. Like what in case you have a function and you never call it? So nothing happens, right? So the same way, whenever you have a property and you define it as a signal, until and unless you call it, it will not initiate or it will not call the code to render anything. So that's what we are what is happening here. So to render that property, you have to invoke this object, right? So you have to call this as a function, otherwise nothing will happen. The advantage of using signals are actually, as they are lazy, they can be evaluated at runtime. So they don't have to be available as soon as your application starts. And this also makes one more thing very efficient, which is something known as change detection. I mean, in Angular or any other framework. So just think about it. You create a property, you just place this property here, and it renders automatically. What's this? What's this magic? Every framework which does or which is available for front end, and where you can do this thing, right, where you can just place the properties and then it runs, they have to do something behind the scenes. So React also has some ways, some mechanism to do this. Angular does change detection. And in Angular, if you use signals, I mean, this is something which is there are efforts still going on. I mean, I think this is more stable now with Angular 17, but yeah, more efforts will be made to make signals default as part of Angular. So this will make your change direction efficient as well. I mean, there are so many resources available on change direction. I don't want to go into detail. Otherwise, we'll just talk about signals or change direction. So just remember this. So you can also define a signal manually. So this is an signal, but as an input. You can also make it required. So I can say input dot required, and then this value is required. So I can say, okay, this is a default value, and what's this in? Needs to be an object required, and I'll say string, and its test has no properties. Okay, so I think this needs to be a property. And you can also do input dot required and say, okay, this is required property. And in case if someone tries to like remove this, so I'm not passing home here, sorry, name property here. So it will throw this error during compile time. So this is also possible using Angular. And let me tell you like how you define a new property or your property as signal on your component, right? So I can say, okay, hey, this is employees, which is an array. So what I can do is I can say this is a signal sorry, of array. And you can also define the type. Let's say if I want to say this is string array, right? So I want to be more specific. So I can also say, okay, this is a string array. And then you can pass all the values here. For example, right now, it can infer the values. So I don't have to do this. So I'll say, okay, this is EMP1, EMP2, EMP3. So we got a list, right? And it can be, of course, array of different values, basically a TypeScript interface. And let's try to render this on HTML, right? So as you said, like using signals, the first thing which you have to do is you have to say employees, and until unless you call this, nothing will happen, right? So let's try to render this employees, and it will tell you, okay, EMP1, EMP2, EMP3. That's it. So this is how you can do it. But let's say if I want to run some loops, or if you want to do some conditional rendering, as we said, right? So how to do that? So Angular now have like all this syntax built in. So I can say if employees. So let's say if employee array is actually empty, I don't want to display anything. I'll say employee length is less than equals to 0. So I'll say I'll just display h1, empty records. And so you can see it says, okay, h1 is not closed. So I can say slash, right? So, and then it can have default just in case you want to display something. So you can say, okay, not with this one, I think. Yeah. So I'll just remove or make the array empty to make this work. Remove this. And let's see the output. So you can see it actually renders empty records. So this is how you can do conditional rendering using @if. This is baked into HTML syntax in Angular, so you don't have to do anything here. What in case you want to run for loop? So I can say @for, and I can say, okay, emp of employees, and then tracked by $index. So I can say tracked by emp dot. We don't have anything here, so we need an ID. So let's try to make this object a little bit emp employees, and then I can say, okay, this is equals to, I'll have two properties. So let's add few things. I'll just say this is to have checking. You can say ID like one, and you can say name. So I have two properties to display emp and emp. Okay, so I also have an ID and I also have a name. And let's see what I'm missing here. Closing tag. Awesome. And then I can pass this bot in this, right? And expected. So it's closing one. Okay, so we got this here, and then here I can say emp dot, right? Okay, so this is my uh, property, and then I can just say this is an interface. Let's do that. I mean, it's basically good for typing. So I can say this, let's define interface here, and remove this interface employee, mhm, which has those two properties, right? So I'll say, okay, this is an ID, which is number, and then we have name, which is string. And then you can say this is type MPS, this type of employee, and employee array. And now the signal becomes an employee array. So let's see, and let's go back. And this should be why ID does not exist on employee array. Why? Employees, because it became employee array of array. And now this should be fine. And now we can render uh, div, and I can say this is emp dot id, and I can just render the name as well. So this is how you can run a for loop, right? So you don't have to do anything extra, just use @for, and then you are good to go. And we have you see one, and then employee one, employee two, and there's something called object which we're getting because of this, right? So because this is an array, and that's why here we have here. So this is an array, and you cannot just render array using this syntax. So that's why it's just printing object. And yeah, And now there is no more empty records. So of course, this we are not able to render this. But what we learned so far is basic syntax, and then how we can do if, for. We can do if else as well. So I can iterate else, right? So we can do else and then probably move this logic. Let's see, and let's format this document. So we have if, and like you can do other way around. So in case like there are records, you can run for loop. Otherwise, just say this is an empty array. And let's see, still works, right? So you can also actually mix and match in case you're creating some table where you want to display that in case there are no records, just say empty records, or if there are records, you want to run for loop and render all the values. So you now know like signals, how signal works, or how you can use them. You know about the input properties, so you can say input and then you can use it. You can also send the values back from your component. For example, I can say, okay, this is name, and I'll say, okay, this is output. So and then let's see. So I'll say, okay, this is an output, and it's nothing but the way to send your value back to your parent in case you are changing something. So let's do this. I'll just place a new button, and on click of this button, we want to update the name. And I'll say this is update name, and let's say, okay, this is new name. And then we need to implement this. So I'll say this is update name function, which emits a new value basically. So I can say, okay, this is new name, this dot new name dot emit, and then I can emit this value, and I'll say, okay, this is just as an example. I'll say, okay, this is new name, right? And what it says argument. Okay, so I have to say this is output of type string because we are in mode, so we have to define all the types explicitly. Let's see how to use it. So now I can go back to my parent component, and here I can say, okay, when new name is triggered, go ahead and update. So I'll say, okay, this is update name, a new function which is available inside my parent component, which receives this as an dollar event. Um, and let's implement this. So now this component is in app component, and that's okay. We receive name, so which is nothing but of type string. So let's look at this is string, and let's do a console.log. I want to show you like how you can this how you can debug your code. So this will be a good example. Console.log name, and save this, and let's go ahead and debug our code a bit. So here it is. So you can see new name. So first thing, which if you want to debug your code, you have to go to sources, and you can press Control P and search for the file. So the file which you want to debug is app.component.ts. Here it is. And let's add a breakpoint here on line 32. Let's click on new name, and you see you are receiving this new name, which is actually rendered from your child component. And I can also open home component, like that's the component where we have the logic. So click add a breakpoint here, add a breakpoint here, which already exists. Click on new name home component. So it says, okay, it is emitting this value, and here we are receiving this value. So this is how you will also be able to debug your code. You can actually see all the code which we have written inside the pages. So you can see pages, and then localhost 4200 src, and then this is your actual code, actual TypeScript code. So you can actually open from here, and you can also add a breakpoint easily on your code base. So I think we are at 1 hour mark. Of course, this was like getting started, very basic. So we learned about like the structure of the Angular application, what Angular component is, how it actually bootstraps, and what is standalone standalone property now, how you add routing, how you signal, how you do uh, input and output, basically like communicating between two components using an input and output. And um, yeah, that's and then we like learn about the basic of how to render the values. So we saw string interpolation syntax, which is available here, but with signals we have to use the function calling. Then we also learned about some basic syntax called if, else, and for. So uh, that's it for the day. And probably, I mean, in case you have more questions as you do more advanced stuff with Angular, just let me know. I mean, I'm available on Twitter. I'm available on LinkedIn whenever, wherever you want to connect me. And happy learning. I mean, I'll keep looking forward to what you do with Angular once you learn more about it. Yes, sir. I think you're on mute.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. It was really a great session, even though I I I learned about Angular for the first time. I have been little bit around Python and on Flask as well, but I'm not a I'm not into totally into development. I'm a cybersecurity consultant, so still I got it a lot interesting because there were some like components, signal and routing. These kind of things are like kind of I'll say common in between the frameworks, and they comes in handy at every place. So yeah, it was pretty much I'll say insightful and informative for the folks who are like really starting with Angular and trying to learn some frameworks on the front end as well as new things. So thank you so much, sir, and thank you for joining from all the way from Germany. So it was like really. It's really helpful for us, and it was really great for us to have you on our stage at Club TechBrewers. Yeah, and yeah, thank you everyone for joining, and yeah, you can also like join or connect with Santosh sir on various platforms. They are, I can say, like they are pretty active on Twitter, I guess. And yeah, you can connect with them. And if you have any kind of doubts regarding these, you want to go further and learn much more about Angular, you can also follow their like articles and everything. So yeah, also we are like we have started our pretty much a new newsletter of our community, and you can like subscribe to our newsletter. Like if you don't want to miss such sessions and like want to keep yourself updated with the community events and everything, definitely go check out our newsletter and subscribe over there. So yeah, let's conclude the day, and thank you everyone for joining, and thank you Santosh sir for being here.
So thank you. Thank you, everyone. And hopefully, I'll see more Angular from you. See you. Bye bye.
Yeah.